Welcome to Unsilent with your hosts Dave and Brian. This is not another current events podcast. We're digging deeper, diagnosing, and discussing what's really going on today, how we got here, and providing observations for future generations.
Welcome to Unsilent. We're Brian and Dave. We're hoping you let us know where you think we got it right and where you think we have completely missed the point of what's going on today, which you can do by visiting unsilentpodcast.com. So let's get into it. What should we talk about today, Brian?
A couple things. You and I have been talking here in the last few weeks about this notion of we kind of fall in this trap of thinking regularly the thing that's going to save us is, well, they wouldn't do that. Like the people in charge,
Yes.
They wouldn't go that far.
Right.
Of course they wouldn't. Of course they wouldn't put us in a situation where kids would like change their gender and not tell their parents. Of course they wouldn't do that. And then you fast forward 36 months and there we are, right?
Right.
And so there's a couple of things out there, two different things I want to talk together. We kind of mash them together. We get an interesting possible big problem. Before we get to that, I heard a guy, Brett Weinstein is a guy you and I have both listened to. Yeah. He was a professor at Evergreen State College, where I just found out last week you are an alumni.
Go Greeners.
So for those people who are listening and understand what Evergreen College is, they're going to be shocked to hear that you went there. And I'm never going to let you live that down. But
I suppose not.
But he asked a question. I can't remember if he was talking to like Tucker Carlson or Joe Rogan. I don't remember who it was, but or maybe just been on his podcast that he does with. I think it's his wife he does a podcast with. Anyhow, he was talking about this idea that if you can have lobbyists that can contribute X number of dollars, whatever it is, to a federal senator's campaign. Let's say they contribute $100,000. I don't know what the numbers are. Right. I don't know what the limits are. I don't know the rules on that stuff, but they contribute X amount of dollars. And then you can just more or less figure that the senator is going to vote your way when things relative to your industry come up, right? That's
sure.
No, we don't like it, and we minimize it, but that's a thing, right?
Sure.
And there's the James O'Keefe guy in the OMG Media group talking about catching people on camera saying, "Well, you'd be shocked to hear it's only $10,000 to buy a senator," basically, you know?
Yes. Yeah.
And so the question he posed is this: if that's true for corporations, if corporations can contribute enough to a senator or a legislator, lawmaker, policymaker, whatever, to their reelection campaign, and more or less figure they're going to get the favors that they want in return,
sure.
What's to prohibit another country from doing the same thing? Where there's specific mechanics, where there's specific rules, policies, laws, etc. And if there is such a thing, how is it possible we've never heard about it being invoked, or we've never heard about it being applied, or we've never heard that those guys in Bangladesh tried this thing, but man, we're lucky we caught him because of whatever federal statute there is. What do you think about that, Dave? Is that again? I'm willing to say that sometimes I might get too far in like tinfoil hat land and whatever. On the other hand, the whole notion is we've been relying upon people's good nature and courage, coupled with having the same values and the same American traditional values and stuff, saving us from this stuff. But what if the people in charge don't have those values, or they don't have the courage, or whatever? What are the mechanics that you know of that would prohibit a country like Indonesia or whatever just contributing $1 billion, let's say, into various campaigns and just getting what they want?
Well, I mean, so there's two levels. One, there is a law, the Foreign Agent Registration Act. So that's the one, I believe, if I remember correctly, that's the one. Was it Michael Flynn or one of Trump's people got zapped because of some? No, it wasn't Michael Flynn. It was another one of his people who got zapped because they did. I think it was even Ukraine related. So many things sort of center on Ukraine.
Yeah.
Because they didn't register as a foreign agent, basically a foreign lobbyist to the United States. So there is a federal law that says if you are doing this, if you are working for somebody as a sort of lobbyist on their behalf for that country in the United States, you got to register. You got to tell the federal government, hey, I'm doing this. And there have been people, there probably are people now that are in jail for not following that law. So there is a law. Now,
so there's a law that says they have to register, but what are the mechanics of what they can and cannot do once they register?
well, yeah, and that I don't know. I don't know where the limits are in terms of, I mean, basically, there are plenty of foreign lobbyists that are in the country that are lobbying our people to senators. And I mean, there are limitations that are prescribed by law for how much money a sitting senator or congressman or whatever can take, or in terms of gifts and such. And people have gotten zapped for taking vacations to, various countries on the dime of a foreign government or foreign
So
corporation.
let's omit those kinds of flagrant kind of, like, I give you cash or gold bars that you put in your wall, or or I send you on a cruise to Tahiti. So let's exclude those things that are more extreme examples, and let's just talk about just straight up campaign donations.
Well, I mean, in theory, at least, foreign countries cannot donate. Foreign countries can't donate to American campaigns directly. But see, I think here's where the meat is in this discussion, though. There are boundaries and laws around campaign donations from foreign countries and people lobbying on behalf of foreign countries and all that. But at the end of the day, money is fungible. In other words, if I say, well, no, I would never fund Brian's habit of doing X, Y, or Z by giving him money to do this, but I'll be happy to pay for all of his groceries. While now he just uses all his money to do X, Y, or Z. So if you, in a world full of corporations and banks and, all sorts of different things where you can deposit money and you can go here and go there and go the other place, it's certainly possible for somebody from another country, for instance, to sort of backdoor their way into buying influence. I mean, if you take a look at, as an example, there's a lot of discussion right now about the Biden family and about, did Joe Biden actually get actual cash from his son and his brother's dealings in other countries. This is a very local issue, so they're a very temporal issue in this time. But the violation of the federal law is not just if you get money directly, but if some people in your sphere of influence, if your family, for instance, enriches themselves on your position in government, that is indeed illegal. So, but that's one degree of separation. What if you go 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 degrees of separation? I guess if there's dollars, if there's money, if there's a will, there's a way.
Yeah. So it seems like if we accept the idea, which I think most of us do, that large corporations somehow contribute money to places that people want that money to go and benefit from. Now, I don't know that I don't know that I could draw a map of like a chain of custody form to show where how the cash went from this entity to, whatever big corporation to whatever senator, and they went and bought a house with it. I don't think I could do that. But I think we kind of all accept the idea that not only is it plausible, not only is it likely, but it's all but a certainty that money goes places where people who make policies and rules and laws benefit from for voting a certain way. Am I overstating that?
No, I mean, no. And
so if it can happen with a corporation, I think the point he was making was, if it can happen for a corporation, why couldn't it happen for Ukraine? Why couldn't, Ukraine is very topical right now. I heard the number, I don't remember what it is. It was an obscene dollar amount that I heard that they started spending on lobbyists, a handful of years ago. It was an enormous amount of money. Now, why would they spend money on lobbyists in Washington, D.C. that was, in the millions of dollars or tens of millions or whatever it was, right? It was, there's just so many hours a lobbyist can be on Capitol Hill talking to people. So there's other things. So I guess that which kind of leads into what we were talking about last week with looking at more of a global scale of what's going on, and also what we're going to talk about today, which is kind of what is, we have a wide open border. We have government officials who are in charge of that who are just flat out lying. Like they the border secure, like the Mayorkas or whatever said it many times, and we see video every day of people just like pouring over by the thousands a day, like literally by the thousands a day. We see video just like it's just a conveyor belt of people. The border's closed, and we kind of have this situation where, again, I couldn't put my finger on the exact mechanics of how it happens, but foreign countries and foreign and global entities could very well be dictating how the policies are written. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, it's both a fair warning of what could indeed be going on and a fair assumption that it is, because of again, money's fungible. It can be moved around.
So we've talked a lot in recent weeks about, values changing and like what was America back in 1960 and 1980 and whatever. Doesn't feel like those rules really apply anymore.
Sure.
And if you start blending this stuff together, it either takes us to a place where, again, we're in tinfoil hat land and we're being super, we're exaggerating things to like fit a crazy story,
right.
Or it also could just be like, holy crap, this like paints a pretty clear picture that explains a lot of things. For example, I'm looking at a New York Times article from November of 2023, and it says more than 24,000 Chinese citizens have been apprehended crossing the United States border from Mexico in the past year. That's more than the 10 preceding years combined. So we have a record number by tenfold of Chinese illegal immigrants coming across our border, right? And then I'm going to play this clip for you. This is a news story that is out of, I think this is a New York affiliate. I'm gonna play this for you and see what you think about this. And again, we put all this stuff together, and it starts to kind of either paint a picture or we start getting into paranoia land, right? Oops,
maybe both.
That's the wrong screen there. I'm going to share a different one. Sorry about that. Give me a second here. I'm learning how to do this. So
there you go.
Let's try that one. Yes, that's the one. Okay, so 24,000 Chinese immigrants coming across the border in 1 year. It's a 10x increase. And then you hear this.
There is no higher honor than serving your country in uniform.
And that honor could be extended to migrants under a new bill introduced by Hudson Valley Congressman Pat Ryan. Called the Courage to Serve Act, this bill would offer qualified and vetted migrants an expedited path to citizenship if they serve in the military. According to Ryan, last year the military services collectively missed recruiting goals by roughly 41,000 recruits, leaving some crucial positions unfilled.
If there are folks with the courage to raise their right hand, take an oath to protect and defend our Constitution, and put their lives on the line for this country, then they sure as hell deserve the opportunity to be citizens in the United States of America.
Okay, so we're saying here then that if you come across the border illegally from wherever, and to fill the gaps that we can't fill in our recruiting for our armed services, you say you're going to serve, boom, you get citizenship. Now that sounds fantastic. Like that sounds like a great thing to do. Except for when you start adding in these other pieces and you start looking at historical context and like historical similarities. And like, I've heard people say, well, anybody ever heard about how Rome fell? That kind of stuff. And again, this is one of those areas where I'm like, I don't want to be crazy conspiracy theory guy. On the other hand, I don't want to be blind to what's blatant and right in front of my face either. What do you think? Is this a big stretch to put these pieces together, or is it like, hey, wait a second, some of these pieces are just starting to kind of fit neatly together?
No, it's not a stretch at all. And I have a particular sort of connection to that story. And this is how. So my dad, 96 years old, was born in Canada. He was a Canadian citizen. He was legally in the U.S. in the late 40s, early 1950s. And he and he basically volunteered for the U.S. Army as a legal immigrant. Yeah. And as a result of that, he became a naturalized citizen. So there's a process there, but the difference is, here's the difference. He was here legally. And so we have it. And what this congressman is doing essentially is extending what sounds like a good idea. That's basically the same thing that my dad did, except legally, to those who have broken the law to get here. Now that's where this really falls apart, I think. And where then you have to say, okay, well, how seriously do we take the illegality of coming into the country without authorization, and how can we really vet the folks that have done this? That's the other question I've got. And this sort of goes to that story of a tenfold increase of Chinese nationals into the country. I mean, we are ostensibly in a Cold War with communist China, and
100%.
then you have a tenfold increase. So what would have happened? Here's an interesting thought experiment. In the early 1980s, late 1970s, if there was a tenfold increase of Soviet citizens that crossed into the United States through whatever means, or Vietnamese, or anybody from a communist country, then what would have happened, do you think, in those days? It would not have been received very well. We certainly wouldn't have said, hey, let's put all the Soviets in the U.S. Army. This is probably not a good idea.
Yeah. This is the part that, again, trying to explain to somebody 60 years from now what this moment is like. I don't know this. I don't know that I have the ability to articulate the frustration.
Oh, exactly.
And the overwhelm and the just disgust and all these things. It's like, okay, let's say that your motives for doing this congressman, all these people, let's say your motives are entirely pure.
Sure.
What has the government ever done like this successfully, where they haven't bungled it and just like screwed it? Like I'm not even joking. Like, give me something that's 1/10 as complicated as this that the government's done well. And let's look at that and say, okay, well, if you can do that, then maybe we open the door for this. We're talking about, okay, so best case scenario, they have great intentions, and we're gonna forget the Chinese folks coming over for. And again, I listen. If I lived in communist China, I'd want to get the hell out of there too. I get it.
Exactly right.
I'm not criticizing those people. I get it.
Right.
I also recognize there's 8 billion people on the planet or whatever, and they can't all come here. No. So I understand that is a reality, and I understand the reality of if I lived in communist China, I'd want to get the hell out of there too. So I get both those things. We got to navigate something in the middle. But let's say these guys who are doing these policies are not being influenced by any outside forces, and they truly believe this is the right thing to do. There's also hours and hours and hours of video of people coming from places like Syria and Iran where they literally chant death to America on a regular basis.
Right. Yeah.
So if we allow this illegal immigration or illegal immigrant can become soldiers on a quote unquote pathway to citizenship, there's no way you could say, well, you can do it if you're from, Canada, but you can't do it if you're from China, or you can do it from China, but you can't do it if you're from Syria. That ain't going to fly.
Right.
There's no way that you could do that in any kind of way that would make any kind of rational sense. So the doors are either open or closed, right? And so why wouldn't a country like Syria or Iran or China even send people and say, these buffoons are like, not only are they welcoming the Trojan horse, they're building the Trojan horse for us.
That's right.
And like putting an escalator in to load our people into the Trojan horse. What is it? It stymies me. I can't even. There's so many possible things that could go wildly wrong with this. I don't even know where to start.
Well, and I think you have to go back to human nature, to basic human nature. And the question you asked at the end, I think, is the money question, and that is, if I'm the Ayatollah in Iran, if I am Kim Jong-un, if I'm Putin, if I'm Xi, and I want to hurt America, and I know that the door is open, then why wouldn't I do that?
Yeah.
There is no, and I don't know that there's anybody that can answer that question. It's so obvious. If your enemy leaves his front door open and basically welcomes you with open arms, and then not only says that, but hey, can you guard after you come in my house, after you walk in the front door where you're not supposed to be, can you kind of guard it and make sure everything's okay?
Right.
I
think that madness. What happens is, again, for me, it seems to always come back to, well, they wouldn't do that. China wouldn't send people over here
but they would.
To do that. Like, if China didn't like us, they would sink a battleship. Like,
right.
You know what I mean? Like it feels to me like people are stuck in a in a not only a Cold War, but a World War II style idea of what war would be like. You know what I mean? Like where it's battleship against battleship and trenches with, rifles. And well, that's really expensive. And it would cost a lot of your own people's lives, to do something like that. And we are isolated by two oceans. Like we do have a geographic advantage in those areas. Like that would be really expensive in both money and death to people if you cared about that kind of thing. I don't know if the Ayatollah cares about that kind of thing or not, but whatever. But it seems to like the idea of the people who dismiss that, it seems like it always goes back to they wouldn't do that. Whether it's our people or their people, they just give the people too much of a benefit of a doubt. And I on one hand, I kind of appreciate living in a world where that might be true. On the other hand, I'm like, you're freaking crazy. There's no way they wouldn't. Of course you would do that.
Well, and I think what people, the place people really get it wrong is in such institutional trust that, well, yeah, maybe the Ayatollah would do that, or maybe communist China would do that, or crazy, young Kim would do that. But surely our government wouldn't allow that to happen. Surely
if there was a threat, they would tell
allowed.
us, or they would stop it, or
surely that could never happen, because maybe we're letting in agricultural workers from Honduras and Venezuela, but certainly they would know, the powerful people, the elites would know if mixed in those there were, terrorists and such. And we've probably caught all the people on the terrorist watch list, except we know that they've turned away, hundreds on the terrorist watch list, and there's millions of what do you call them, gotaways, and we don't know who they are. So either we are, if there are no terrorists wandering around the country, then we are the most lucky people in all of history, because we just happened to catch the few hundred that were the terrorists, and among the millions there were just people that were agricultural workers. I mean, somehow that scenario doesn't really pass the smell test.
And then you start folding in, I don't have the stories pulled up. They're easy to find though. These are not things that are really in much of a debate. The land that China has purchased near military bases, the millions of acres of farmland that we no longer own, that's owned by Canada and China and other, I don't remember all the countries off the top of my head, but I remember like learning about history in wars, and one of the things that they would do is attack the supply chain.
Yeah.
Well, a major part of the supply chain was food.
Right. Exactly.
So you start looking at, okay, so we're bringing in record numbers of people from arguably our greatest threat geopolitically, which is China. Okay.
Sure.
And they are buying land at a record pace next to our major military installations, including like where the stealth bombers are located and like things like that. Like these, I'm not talking about like, military installations where, they're making latrines. I'm talking about like top secret kind of stuff and important stuff. And they're buying farmland at a record pace. It seems to me, now I'm no military guy, I'm no military genius by any stretch, but it seems like those are two big pieces of the military supply chain, is food and whatever's housed at the stealth bomber site or other military installations.
Well, and I mean, and even if you assume that the elites have those places protected well enough that, somebody bad isn't going to get in. What about, I regularly drive by the power stations, the substations out here, near my house. And it doesn't seem like it would be that difficult if you had, just say, how many, we've had literally millions of people in the last several years come in this country. We don't know who they are or where they're from. They're, some of them, we know who they say they are because they've been, I'm from here and I'm claiming asylum. Okay, well, go wander around the country for a few years. We'll call you when your court date's ready. But what if 1/100th of 1% of those folks had ill intent, and all of a sudden on a Thursday in March decided that with some help from people that don't like us. And there's plenty of people that don't like or resent the United States, or that want us maybe not destroyed, but knocked down a few notches so that we don't, fiddle around in their neighborhood like in Southeast Asia. What if on that Thursday in March, they, in some kind of coordinated way, because we have these things called cell phones and the internet that we can talk to each other without, in theory, being interrupted, took out 20-30% of the substations in the U.S., or or in some way took out the highway infrastructure, or somehow
or
poisoned
tainted the
the
water
water
supply
infrastructure.
for like Mount Shasta to LA or something like that. Or
Yeah, I mean, we're talking, because of how dependent we are as Americans. We would have mass starvation on our hands, and Safeway would be empty in about 3 hours, and there'd be no food, because that's where food comes from. So that's not a I don't think. I think knowing. Here's the thing, Brian. I think knowing human nature. I think what we have to come back to, and if I were to communicate anything to Kenny G in the future, it's this: human nature changes very, very little from generation to generation, from century to century, from eon to eon. We go back and we see the things that happened 1,000, 2,000, 5,000 years ago, and we see the same things happening now. That says that people, we evolve and lots of cool things happen, and we got the internet now, and Kenny G will have flying cars and robot dogs, and it'll be all wonderful. But but humans will still be humans. And what we know about humans is that in these kinds of situations that happen over and over and over, bad people will take advantage. People that want something for themselves, that don't care about other people, will take advantage. Or other tribes, other national tribes, seeing the weakness of the most powerful tribe on earth, aka the United States, they will take advantage. It's not a question. And whoever it is in Kenny G's time, maybe in Kenny G's time, it's Australia is the most powerful country in the world, or Chad, or whatever. Who's ever the most powerful, there's going to be a lot of people lined up ready to knock them off their high horse and to take advantage of their weakness when it happens. And it will happen.
Yeah. I think fun. That part of, I think that I would amend what I said earlier, that the primary argument is that people say they wouldn't do that. Maybe that's not as much of the argument as I first stated. Maybe a second part of that is we've evolved as a species so much that, of course, they wouldn't do that, because people aren't capable of that kind of dreadful behavior, that savagery, that barbaric behavior. We've outgrown that. Like, mustard gas was a thing in 1914, but it's not a thing now. I mean, nobody would do that. Come on, like, that's not. And so, I just don't believe that's true. I think that, like you said, that people haven't done it to us because we have some very significant hurdles for them to overcome. That's geographically, the power of our military, the economic, there's like major hurdles to overcome. So we've been lucky and isolated, and we've had benefits that other, countries or empires or whatever didn't have. But why? Again, I just go back to, like, if you hate America, which I hate to tell everyone, like, they do.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
China really doesn't like us. Iran really doesn't like us. Syria does not. They really don't like it. Turkey really doesn't like us. Like, these people don't like us, except for the part where we give them money. And when we protect them from whoever they don't like. We have these odd relationships where, the enemy of my enemy is my friend kind of a thing, but they really don't like us. They just don't. Well, and so why wouldn't they harm us? Why wouldn't they come over and do these things when we're opening the freaking red carpet for them? Why wouldn't they do that?
And whoever is the dominant power, it was the same with Rome. We could keep going back to Rome, but it's a good example. It's a recent example. So go back to Rome, go back to Assyria, go back to Babylon, go back to any of the ancient empires, and whoever was the dominant power, somebody was jealous. That's one of those. This is one of those things that doesn't change from generation to generation, is jealousy and envy. It's an ingrained human emotion, and it's going to play out whoever is in that top role. So it wouldn't matter if it was us, or maybe Iceland became the dominant power on the earth, 200 years ago. Well, okay, it would have been them. So it just doesn't matter. And if we don't take into account human nature and the predisposition of human nature. One, to think they've got something that I want, and so therefore I think ill of them. And number two, if you've got what everybody wants, think, well, I get it what everybody wants. Nobody's going to take it away from me because look how much better I am than everybody else. Those two things working in concert cause the downfall of nations.
Yeah. I think that it's the American NIMBYism that I've been talking about the last few weeks.
Sure,
like,
it is.
As long as it doesn't directly affect me, it probably sucks for those people who have to deal with the migrants coming across and ruining their ranch land, spending their family for 5 generations. But it didn't bother me. So my taxes went up some, or we're an extra $4 trillion in debt since 18 months ago. Last time I heard the number, but I'm still making my boat payment, and my mortgage is still being met. Like, it just feels like a level of complacency and inappropriately assessing risk, I guess, is kind of how I would look at it.
It's complacency, it's normalcy bias, and it's being disconnected from the broader story that's going on and being hyper focused on our own local narrative.
Right.
And in our own local narrative, things are okay. But that's just Seattle. That's just Portland.
Yeah.
That's just wherever.
And again, balancing all that stuff, like you and I were talking about this stuff. Like, we clearly care about this stuff. It really does bother me.
Yeah.
And I only have so many years on this planet,
right?
And I want to spend time with my kids and grandkids, and I want to do things that are fun, and I want to ride my motorcycle, and I want to travel, and I don't want to have to worry about this stuff all the time. And it's overwhelming. And what am I going to do to stop 8,000 people from crossing the border every day?
Right,
like, all these things are happening all at the same time. And so I totally get the part where people are just like, what am I going to do? Like, just, I'll live my life the best I can until I can't live that way anymore, and then I'll adapt. I mean, I am starting to maybe be jealous of that mindset.
Yeah, I think, and I think I think there's enough going on in most people's lives so that they can conveniently sort of plug their ears and ignore the stuff that's happening until it gets so bad that that it's impossible.
Yeah.
But the illustration of these things, I think, can be found in what we saw on October 7th in Israel. So the idea that no, human beings, we've evolved beyond that. Yeah, the Jews and the Palestinians, they got some problems with each other, but the Holocaust, it could never happen again until you find children being beheaded and all sorts of things that show that we have not evolved. I mean, human beings as a species has not evolved above certain things that we thought or we hoped in our Platonian view or utopian view of the world that we had evolved beyond.
Yeah, I mean, we're only, I don't know, 60, 70 years from Stalin, like, torturing and murdering who knows how many millions of Christians or whatever it was.
Yeah.
Like people say, well, it's just the Jews. It's just the Jews and Palestinians. It's just this group. It's just that group. Well, it's just whatever group doesn't go along. That's who it is. It's not because of some agreed upon, it's okay to just pester the Jews. I don't think that, it's just whoever is in the way. I think that that's the part that we kind of dismiss, I think, right?
Well, and it's also, I think the other thing that happens is, so why is the United States lived such a sort of an idyllic life? Part of it is because when you get so much momentum in a positive direction, it's hard to knock that off. It's hard to sort of knock over that train that's going so fast in a certain direction. So it's not that here that the system we've set up is just by the nature of the system is so infallible that it could never be corrupted. It's the fact that it's got such momentum behind it, such positive momentum behind it, that it's really hard to knock off. That's why you don't have, countries invading us that otherwise, if we were weak, would say, sure, let's take a few thousand land aircraft over and, confiscate those California breadbasket fields that we could feed our country with. So I think there's a certain amount of, that's just a raw reality of, I think, what happens in a society that has been so successful, but is losing its way. I think that's where we're at right now, is we're a society that's been hugely successful and we're starting to lose our way. And that's why you find people starting to come and trying to knock us off our high horse because they don't think the system's strong enough to withstand them anymore.
Yeah, I do think, the fourth turning, not the newest one, but the one that came out in '98 or whatever year it came out. It talked about these crises eras always come down to one thing. In the Civil War, it came down to slavery, basically, right? World War II was stopping the Nazis in Japan, and in the Revolutionary War, it was we founding a new country. There was so much tyranny from the perspective of the colonists that we had to put a stop to that. But it always comes down to one thing, and we never really know what the one thing is until the one thing is here.
Yeah.
And it's beginning to feel like this illegal immigration thing could be the one thing. For example, there's just a sheer volume of people coming across, and the sheer volume of people who, even if it's just 1/100th of 1% of people who come across who really wish to do us harm, there's enough of those people here now that could really do devastating things.
Yeah, absolutely.
It was at 8 million people is the number over the last few years. So it'd be, I don't know, 8,000 people or something like that, or 800 people, whatever it is, whichever number it is.
Yeah.
There's more than enough people here to really do us harm.
Absolutely.
if they wanted to,
Yeah.
right? Now you couple that with the guys a couple weeks ago, as we're recording this, beat up a couple New York City cops. They got released with no bail. They come out of the courtroom, walking down the street, flipping the cameras off, and basically saying, "F you, America. F you, and you're we don't care about you." So you have that going on. You have more and more. It's not quite mainstream yet, but it's even the mainstream media is starting to kind of get on board and reporting there's rapes happening, there's homicides happening, there's really bad things happening that are being perpetrated by illegal immigrants.
Right.
And simultaneously, you have, as I'm reading the story right now, you have, you and I, when we fly, I just flew last night, came home from up in your area, the People's Republic of Washington. I flew home and I had to show my ID and I had to show all my proper paperwork. But there's a carve out. You don't have to do that stuff if you're an illegal immigrant. There's this sign here that was a picture was taken by somebody in the airport. It looks like Miami Airport. And it's a notice for non-U.S. citizen document validation, blah, 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 blah. And it basically tells them, if you're not a U.S. citizen, just let us know, and we won't ask you for your credentials. Oh, and also the pictures that you and I have taken of us with the camera that's at the airport, we won't bother with that part either.
So I don't know what to say. I mean, go back 5 years and ask somebody there if they would think you're Saturday Night Live skit, Brian. I mean, they would think that's a Saturday Night Live skit.
So you mash all this stuff together, and it's, again, from my perspective, and again, I don't love talking about this stuff because it sounds like I'm rooting for this to happen. I'm not. I wish they would turn all this off tomorrow.
Absolutely.
And I wish all this would stop. But mathematically, it's not possible for really bad things not to happen at this point. On the path we're on. It's just it's a certainty. There's no way 8 million people came here illegally who all love us and wish us nothing but goodwill.
They're all saints.
It's already being evidenced, right? And then you add in the money that's being handed them. I read a story that New York now is supposedly, I don't have any way to verify this, but $10,000 per gift card or credit card.
Yeah.
People are being laid. Again, you start when the government or the policymakers or the people in charge, whatever their roles are, start giving preferential treatment to people who are here illegally at the expense, not just in tax dollars, but including tax dollars and expense of opportunity and expense of whatever of the people who pay for all this. Holy crap, is that a recipe for disaster? I mean, I don't know what you could do to purposely create, if you had all kinds of power to do whatever you wanted.
Right.
I don't know what else you could do that would be more destructive for a country than this soup of stuff that I'm describing.
Well, and you have to also figure into that equation the guardrails that have been put around the folks that have just done it the legal, normal way forever and ever. In other words, if you or I've had this before where I've talked about immigration issues, etc. And so, oh, well, you're just a racist. You're just
right.
you don't want you don't want the browning of America or something like that.
Right.
I don't know that the folks that are the thousands are coming in from China are really brown, but I guess that's a separate issue. You're not supposed to say something about that.
I'm not sure which category that the people who decide who gets to go to Harvard based on race, I'm not sure which box they would put them in. I don't know how that
well,
works.
you can't bring that up, Brian. That's not fair. You're not supposed to talk about that. but you see, I think what happens, so if you just took this one issue we're talking about right now, the illegal immigration and the likelihood, the almost the statistical certainty that among those people are a number of people that mean a serious harm. I mean, we know that there's a number of, there's been murders, rapes, there's been all sorts of things that we know about that's in the mainstream news that are happening, in those communities. But it's a statistical certainty that there are a lot of people in that large sampling set that mean us the country's serious harm. And then you've got plenty of anecdotal evidence, such as the stuff that we've seen happening at the Darien Gap in Panama, et cetera. But you take all of that and you say, okay, that's a thing. Now, if that's the only thing, maybe we can handle that only thing. But if you take and wrap around the edges of that only thing, that if you complain about it, you're a racist, you're a bigot, you're a whatever. If you take and wrap other absurdities around that, like, one of the big stories in the news right now is girls being seriously, physically, lifelong getting damaged because of biological males who say they're girls participating in sports. If you wrap that around it, and then you say, well, how does that relate, Dave? Well, it relates because when you pile absurdity upon absurdity, eventually the normal person just their head explodes. It's just they just like, I can't deal with any of this. You're telling me that this 6'5" dude with a beard is a girl and he's going to play in my kindergarten girl, and you're telling me that these folks that have come in from another country don't have to show ID, and I get in trouble when I if I don't have my driver's license.
$10,000 for showing up, and I'm funding that, and you're going to call me a racist if I question it while I'm funding it?
That's right. I mean, so you get to a point where society is a joke. It's absurd. It's complete. Now, let me give you another very small local example that I learned the other day. This is very local. Sorry, Kenny G, but I went in and I discovered that in Washington State, we have to pay tabs. We have to buy tabs for our cars, license plates, and such.
I just did that for my car there on Saturday.
Well, I'm sorry, Brian, you're an idiot. You shouldn't have paid it. And here's what I mean. No, listen. So I went in and I looked at the back of my car, and my tabs expired in August of last year. So I'm like, oh crap. And I'm like, I am the luckiest guy on the planet because cops follow me all the time and have never pulled me over. I mean, I get, and if they did and they told me, I would have gone. So I went in and I talked to them and they said, oh, okay, yeah, you want to renew that? And I said, well, yeah, don't I have to? They said, well, you could wait till August, that's only, and then you don't have to pay for next year. I'm like, what? And so I asked somebody, and I'm not going to say where. So you're telling me that buying tabs and paying this tax is an option in Washington State. And basically and I started paying attention to it. And there are all sorts of cars driving around here that have 2021, 2022. Now, what does it have to do with what we're talking about? It has something very specific to do with what we're talking about. The societal breakdown because of the absurdities that happen. Like, I'm a law-abiding citizen. Now, I renewed my tabs for the record. I renewed my tabs. So maybe I'm an idiot. I don't know. But when society becomes so utterly absurd that you've got these things that we're talking about happening, people that are just normal folks say, well, why should I play by the rules? Why should I even bother?
I think that's true until they start seeing it negatively impact their children. And then I think they get pissed.
Well, certainly.
I think that's where it turns to rage, is where, I think people can look at it and say, okay, well, I'm going to do the right thing because it's the right thing to do.
Right.
But, and it's absurd that I have to show my ID to get on the airplane, but the guy who's here from El Salvador does not have to. Right. And like that. But I think where it will make a gigantic leap is when those immigrants' children or those immigrants will get benefits that law-abiding, tax-paying citizens' children don't get.
Sure.
I think that's where they will probably go from, yeah, it's the right thing to do by my tabs to F this. We're where's my what do they call those things? The
pitchfork?
Yeah, where's the pitchfork, right? So it feels to me like, again, I don't know if it's worse if the people in charge think this is a good idea, or if it's worse if they know it's a good idea and they're letting it happen. I don't know which is worse, but it does feel to me like this is a good candidate to be one of the, if not the topic, that unravels things to the point where people are willing to, dig in their heels and just not budge, and whatever that would look like, it would look like. But it just, the level of absurdity, the level, the volume, like, this soup that's being created is just like insane, and there's no possible way it ends well if you're a tax-paying citizen that has any hope of seeing a country like we were raised in, like, again. Like, it just seems like that's an impossibility at this point.
Well, and there's no possible way it ends. It reverses itself incrementally. You see, so this is the irrational hope that the average person who's caught up in normalcy bias and who's caught up in, but it's not happening in my backyard. Not, this is the hope against hope that won't happen. And that is that it's going to, it's gone, the pendulum swung that far. It's going to incrementally swing back. And, we'll once again arrive at a time when, men compete with men and women compete with women, and we have borders, and we're not letting terrorists and murderers and rapists in and such, that notion that it can incrementally creep back, I think. And, I'm a positive person. I'm a glass half full kind of person. I don't like to believe that it will take a disaster, an out and out, nationwide, perhaps global disaster, to reverse course. But looking at it historically, and again, through the lens of sort of the demographic shifts that we see in the fourth turning and the pendulum and other works that have documented this, I don't see any other way. It's you can just hope that
it would take a level of, and the next video I'm going to show you here is going to kind of speak to this ironically. It would take a level of rationality and objectivity and like critical thinking and being really solution oriented and a level of team building, for lack of a better term, that we just have not seen in decades at this point. Like that the person with those qualities I've not seen on a national stage.
No.
In some, I mean, JFK might be the last one. I mean, I don't. I mean, the kind of person that could, a Reagan type wouldn't be able to do it. There's just no way. It would be too polarizing. The kind of person would take to have all those qualities to bring this up and to really unite people, like really solving a problem and getting past the tribalism. I don't know that I've seen that person in my life. I don't know that I have.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. And you also wonder if that person's out there, are they even going to bother?
I don't know why you would. I mean, it like,
because it's like, you gotta be like, you gotta have an ego that's the size of Texas in order to try and take on that, because it's just so
let me show you something that gives me a little bit of hope. And for those listening, I'm going to tell you right now, you're going to want to turn your volume down a little bit. Not all the way. You're going to want to hear this, but turn it down some, and you'll understand when I play this. This is the kind of thing that gives me some hope, though, Dave. So this is like a short 10-second clip. This is a person filming somebody in, I think it's her neighborhood, and there's a rainbow flag painted on the street. So just take a listen to this.
This is the neighborhood, and you are not welcome.
That's why I need to be here.
So this is, she welcomes this guy to the neighborhood, not the neighborhood, the neighborhood. And then when he starts speaking, she just begins that shrieking. And this, it gives me some hope, though, because
tell me, I want to hear this.
I think that people are getting tired of that.
Yeah,
I really do think that they don't have the time or energy or desire to analyze the border situation like you and I just spent 45 minutes talking about all the pieces of that border thing that make a really ugly soup or whatever. I don't think people are interested in that so much. I do think they're interested in not being around people like that.
Yes, exactly.
And I do think that they are aware that for too many years we've let people like that decide what is culturally okay and what's not culturally okay.
That's right.
And we let people like that decide what should be taught in schools and what shouldn't be taught in schools. And I think that is I feel like that's the pendulum is beginning to swing a little bit.
Yeah.
Do you agree with that?
No, I do. I think that there's people I think that there's people that are they've had enough. They've just really had enough. And you mentioned it earlier, and I think this is the tipping point, the social societal tipping point for a lot of this stuff is going to be kids, and is going to be the environment that kids are raised in, whether it's that kind of situation with a screaming lunatic controlling society, controlling the local society, or whether it's the schools, or shoving certain, ideologies down kids' throats at schools. I think that's what's going to animate people to really get excited and to really get involved, because it takes a lot to get us off of our couch. It takes a lot to get us, up from watching TV at night and, all those kinds of stuff and get involved.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that. I was going to say that we are a generous bunch, but you're right. It's equal parts generosity and laziness.
Yeah. Well, it is. I mean, it's also self-interest. So, like, I mean, I spend the vast majority of my days and a lot of my nights running around doing business stuff that's, interesting to me and fulfilling and meaningful and all this kind of stuff. And so, and I've got family, you've got all these things you're doing that are of interest to you and are fulfilling to you. And it's like, do I really need to go down to that neighborhood meeting about how this wackadoodle ideology is being shoved down kids' throats? What is it going to take to put my own self-interest aside and say my broader self-interest is caught up in the survival of my country and my community? That's when those neurons snap and when those synapses in the brain connect and say, it's within my own self-interest to not stand in front of the shrieking person and let them shriek at me anymore. At that point, then I think, and when enough people do that, then I think at that point you do see significant pushback. Now, that pushback is not going to be, as I said earlier, it's not going to be just incremental, because the other side's not going to incrementally walk back.
No.
They're going to push that much harder, and then you have conflict.
I think what I'm envisioning at this point, or predicting, I guess, is, again, I think that by and large our society is one that where we give people the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah.
We assume that even if I don't agree with them, they're coming from a place of like they want to do the right thing.
Yeah, goodwill.
And I think that is changing, because people like that clip we just played, like that could be your third grade teacher for your kid. And they say we're gonna say Christianity is bad, for example, and we're gonna salute the gay flag every morning. And then I walk in as a parent and say, that's not, you don't have the right to do that. And they shriek like that in response.
Right.
They don't even dignify me with a response. They just shout me down.
Right.
I think that is where people will say, why am I listening to this person? Why am I engaging in this? Why am I considering their point of view?
Yeah.
And it will turn all that off, which up to this point, people by and large do take in their point of views. They do, they do listen to their points of view. They do say, well, maybe I am too rigid on this. Yeah. And again, they may come to the conclusion that they're not, but they will by and large entertain the thought.
Yes, that's right.
And I think that when that kind of retort is what we get when we question things and say, like, why is this, like, why am I, like, the guy was, I think he was basically saying, why am I not welcome? Because she said it was the neighborhood. Right. He's like, why am I not welcome? And that was her response. She started shrieking. And I think that's when people will be like, why am I doing this? Like, why should I consider this person's point of view at all?
Yeah.
And they'll just begin to shut him down. So I kind of think that the pendulum is swinging some on that. Well, I don't think it's going to help on the border and those big things like that. But I do think on a person to person level, it's beginning to change, or people just don't entertain those. They don't consider their points of view. They're not going along just to go along now, I guess.
But here's something to chew on. And that is, I think the border issue and this issue, the societal issue, I think they're connected. And here's how. I think that once people have decided on one thing, whatever thing that happens to be, whether it's the border and, or whether it's what happened to you at the airport, or whether what's happens in that sort of societal thing that you just played. Once people say, I've had enough of this, they're going to be more open, and they're going to be predisposed to say, you know what? I've had it on a lot of things.
Yeah.
I'm sick of it on this level and on this level and on the schools and on, they're going to say,
and
I'm
another
sick of it
thing,
all.
and another thing.
Exactly. Exactly. And see, that's when a societal flip, I think, does happen. And because it's, so I think there's an issue that's a catalyst, but that catalyst issue, it doesn't just reside in the sort of the realm of the catalyst. It then spreads like wildfire into, we're just not going to take it anymore. And it is very big.
Yeah. And I think that, I complain about the lawmakers and the Congress people and whatever. They're there because that's who we put there.
Yes, that's right.
I think once that flip happens, you're describing, a new type of representative will be sought after.
Yes.
And will be put in. And I think that's when things will start to rapidly change on things like the border.
Yes.
It may take a couple of years to the next election cycle or whatever. But the people that represent us, they kind of do represent us. They're complacent. They're passe about this stuff, just like we are.
Yep.
And then all of a sudden we won't be passe about this stuff anymore and complacent. And then we will put people in place, theoretically, who represent that new level of urgency and those new needs. And then they will fix this stuff. Yep. I just hope it happens before really ugly things happen, because like we've said before, it's a mathematical certainty that the volume of people come over and the border is one. It's not the thing, it's a thing. There's like 9 things like that are these really big things like that going on. So
that's right.
Anyhow, don't forget, you can go to unsilentpodcast.com to see our social channels there. If you want to leave a comment, we'd love to hear what you think. You can do that on Rumble channel. That's probably the best way to leave a comment. We'd love to hear your take. And if you think that we're explaining something to Kenny G wrong, we'd love to hear it. And until next time, this is Dave and Brian signing off.
See you next week.
Do you want to be unsilent? Make your voice heard on our social media channels and share where you think we got it right or wrong. Go to unsilentpodcast.com for social links so you can join the discussion.